Let's,
Did you turn on AI too?
Mhm.
Okay.
let's get this party started. All right. So just a little reminder, thank you everybody for being here today. If you're able to turn your cameras on so we can see your faces, that would be fabulous. As part of our Zoom etiquette. John, I'm gonna ask, since I know that there's some in Wenatchee and everybody, and we've got people out in Zoom land, could I ask you to take the roll call, please, so that I don't miss anybody?
I'll go for it.
Sure. Oh, thank you. I don't have to unmute. Such a weird feeling.
Or Teresa, great.
Dell Anderson. Don't see him. Manuel, yes.
Present.
Rosalinda. Senator Warnick, yes.
I'm present.
Teresa Atkinson.
Here.
Okay. Molly Morris. We heard her. Nancy Spurgeon. Peter, I saw him. Ray, I saw him.
Present.
Okay. Carlene. Yes.
Maybe.
I'm sorry.
Okay, Linda, yes. Lori Bergman.
I want to.
I don't
And
see
then-
Lori unless she's in the room with you guys.
No, and then Emilio's here.
Shoot in person.
Yeah, so we're just missing 4.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
All
So
right.
Lori. Nancy, okay. Cool.
Okay. Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate it. All right. Do we have any declaration of conflicts today based on our agenda? I'm using my teacher wait time. All right.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Dell's here, by the way.
I got him coming in.
Hearing none. Do we have any public comment that we're aware of? Awesome, hearing none. And so I'll ask for approval of the consent agenda.
This is Carlene, also move to approve.
Peter seconded, it looked like. I saw your hand go up.
Yep, a second.
All right, any discussion?
Linda, I just want to recognize that we do have the Action Health Partner contract as part of the consent agenda. Board members, you received that via a separate email as well. So I will share that a lot of the work with the social care network and the waiver will be explained later on today.
Thank you, John. All right. Without any further discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
I,
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carried. My work is done. John, I'm turning it over to you for our update.
Share, John.
Do you have mine up?
Is it Jay Chapman? Then
Yeah.
yes, okay. And then let me just get it.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna get my ED report up here.
One moment.
That's perfect. So as Mariah's gonna be doing the sharing and I'll let her know what next screen is. So thank you all for coming today. We're gonna have a few key updates from the team, but really a lot of today's focus in this afternoon is we're gonna have a section really diving more into the 1115 Medicaid waiver renewal and the work we're doing in our region to build out a social care network and a community-based care coordination infrastructure. So you'll see that at the end of the agenda. What I really just want to emphasize, and you'll probably hear this a few times throughout today and during the presentation, is if you have questions on any of the topics today, specifically around the waiver, we really want you guys to jump in and continue to ask those questions. Today is a chance to really get to learn and understand more about this work. I will assume that we will be coming back more than just today to explain things and that there will continue to be questions, but the more and more we can get everyone up to speed, I think that's going to be important. We will have a contract with the state coming out this month as well that will need to go to the board for approval. I'm sorry, Finance Committee and Linda, I just emailed you guys today. It will end up being electronic approval at some point. We'll have time in the Finance Committee to review it first, though, prior to it going to the full board for electronic approval. So that's also why I really want to encourage you guys to take time to ask questions and understand the work that's going on today. If you go to the next slide. But before I do that, I just want to welcome Kara, who is filling a summer position supporting the rollout of the Wellbeing survey and helping a little bit with the dialogues as well. Kara, I don't know if we can't get you to like show up on the screen, can I? Or you have to talk. So Kara, do you feel comfortable just sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kara. I graduated from Manson High School and I'm currently a junior at Brown University studying public health. Interested in health equity, social determinants of health, community health. So I'm home for the summer and was interested in the work here at Thriving Together. So here I am.
And, you know, I want to say we're really lucky as we've been looking at the survey rollout and how we can support capacity and engagement in our region to get the survey out. We were lucky to have Kara also outreach to us at the same time. And so she also found us in figuring out how she could support some of our work over the summer months. And so really just lined up very, very well. And we had the opportunity to bring her on. This is, I should also say, this is day one for Kara. So she's been getting oriented as well as coming to our board meeting. I just really wanted to welcome her and look forward to her time here this summer.
Thank you.
The other thing I will just throw out there for board members is she is in school for public health. She will be interested in just learning more about health, public health in general. And so as we continue to learn more about her interests, we also want to give her the opportunity to connect and grow and learn and understand the work in the community. So we may be making some connections out there to see if she can talk with any of you and learn more about your guys' specific work as well. So if we do that, please be willing to find some time to really share and give your experiences as well with her.
Thank you.
If you go to the next slide. I see the fly buzzing above the, for all those not in the room, there's a fly flying above the monitor as well. Just a few updates, just to keep you guys up to speed on some of our operational updates, specifically around our position postings. So we did post a tribal engagement and community empowerment manager position. We will share this out with the board afterwards. This just got posted this last week. It's going to be really important. I feel like this position is going to be best served if we can get it out into our localized community and information channels. It is on Indeed, but I don't really see Indeed as the best place to recruit for this position. So we will send it out. If you guys know any appropriate channels, know any interested individuals, please share it with them. We are also connecting with the tribes to do that as well. For the senior operations director position, we are in the interviewing process this week. And so hopefully by the next board meeting, we will be able to introduce a new individual to you. Again, this position is gonna support a lot of our contracting, reporting, grant writings, be a strong partner with Sarah in the finance piece as well as directly supervising staff as well. Other potential positions, as we have shared in the previous org chart, we're gonna be looking at posting a program VP or program director. We're gonna get the ops director underway first and understand some of the capacity before making the determination. We had talked in the past an executive assistant. I've been working with Teresa and she's chatted with Mariah a little bit about how we could potentially build some of those roles into staff. So Teresa's actually providing a lot of the support for me right now, as well as the governance support. And we are really shifting to try that out first before we look at posting a position. So just wanted to give you guys an update overall on some of the operations and positions. If you go to the next slide. Like I said, we are going to be providing a good chunk of time on the waiver, but we are in the process of finalizing an umbrella contract amongst the 9 accountable communities of health and the healthcare authority for the waiver renewal. This contract should go through June 2028. The umbrella contract is going to be the base contract language for all this work, and then in the end, they're going to be developing scopes of work that will include the specific funding and work associated with the funding. And so pretty quickly, we're going to see a scope of work for what's called health-related social needs infrastructure funding, health-related social needs services funding. I'm going to say those, if you haven't heard those terms, luckily, we're going to spend some time this afternoon talking a little bit about them, not that it necessarily will make complete sense. What I would say is CMS likes those terms, and so that is why it is in all these fundings and these protocols, and it's really, what are those key needs, social determinants of health, care coordination needs, services that provide individuals need to be healthy and well. I'm gonna also emphasize a couple of times today, this contracting will really be operationalized through our social care network infrastructure and contracted community care hubs. So again, as part of this work, we've always emphasized how do we build these services and supports with partners that are already doing the work in our region. And you're going to see that as we go through where we're going with this work moving forward. Final contract will require approval by the board, so you will be. The downside to this is we're really not getting to finalization by this board meeting. We're going to need it signed prior to the next board meeting. And so we'll work with the finance committee to get any questions asked about that, and then we'd send it out to the board. Just because it's an electronic vote doesn't mean you just have to click yes on that thing. You can read through it and ask any questions electronically as well. I'm also happy to meet with any individuals about the contract too. Next slide. Few just additional contracting and grants updates just to share with you all. We did submit a USDA distance learning and telemedicine grant for $697,923. We should be finding out about that grant in September. So more to come, but just wanted to give you guys an update. I had talked at the last meeting that we were looking at submitting a HRSA RCORP grant, and we were working in partnership with WISHA, Grand Columbia Health Alliance, and Family Health Center. And then we decided at a point in time to pull that submission. The partners felt like there was just more work we needed to do internally to be ready for that, which was a good move, and which is part of the process of learning how to collaborate on grants. The DOH Care Connect contract, so I shared this in previous meetings, but as part of the Care Connect work, DOH is moving all of its contracting in the regions under the accountable communities of health. And so for us right now, the DOH Care Connect contract is currently with Action Health Partners in our region. I think I saw Deb or someone from Action Health Partners logged in. So that will be moving under us. Really, in the end, we're gonna look or we're planning to look and act like a pass-through, and that would really go back out into Action Health Partners to continue to work moving forward. That is, at this current juncture, that's really just a contract from August to June of next year. After June of 2025, there is no concrete plans or funding associated with Care Connect at this point. Next slide. Let me stop there for a moment. Any questions on those initial slides? And I apologize to everyone on the screen because we're looking at the big projection instead of at the owl. So if it doesn't look like any of us are looking at you, it's because we're not, we actually are. We're just not looking at you through the owl. So I wanted to give Veronica a moment to give a quick update, because we have launched the Vital Conditions Network. And we are starting to enroll organizations into our network. So Veronica, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, John. Can everybody hear me okay?
Louder.
Yeah, for the past almost 10 months, it's been a while. No, actually 10 months. For the
Kind of
past,
hard,
there's
it's kind of
been-
hard to hear her. I'm sorry.
Okay, I thought it was just us.
Let me turn. Can you guys hear me now?
You're a little muted, Veronica. Can you change your microphone?
Is your laptop
Can you
open?
guys hear me okay now?
No.
That's worse.
How
Is your
about-
laptop open? Oh, she heard us.
Okay, let me try out. Give me a second. Sorry, I apologize. Can you guys hear me now?
Not really much better.
It's a little better. Just proceed forward. Just recognize, speak loudly, because it's a little muted.
Yell at us.
Yeah, Nancy wants you to yell at her.
Okay, can you hear me now?
It's still muted, but we can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's nothing different than the other times.
Is your laptop open?
Yeah, it's open.
Okay.
How about if I just talk into my microphone? Can you guys hear me if I talk in here?
That's a little.
Okay, I'll just talk in here. So yeah, for the past 10, 11 months, I've been working alongside the Stewardship Council to help really move this work forward. And in reality, the Stewardship Council has been doing this work probably not as obviously not as long as I have, because I came after them, but even before the Stewardship Council, I want to acknowledge there was I believe a strategy work group that was kind of planting the seed for all of the work and the vision of this network. And since I came along last summer, we finalized a partner agreement towards the end of last year, which really emphasizes and outlines those 3 action levers that will really help move, the needle, I guess, collectively as a region for the work that we do. And this year, at the beginning of this year, we finalized the network, the Vital Conditions webpage. And I believe I've already shared it with Stewardship Council, so this might be repetitive for some members, but that has been launched for a couple of months now. And I've been meeting with different partners across the region and trying to get members to join the network. We are sharing it through our newsletter and some other avenues. So I'm also holding onboardings on Tuesdays at 2 and Thursdays at 10 a.m. So for any new network members that join, that go to our website and join through our forum page that we have online, it basically triggers an email notification to me, and then I'll send out the options for new members to register for an onboarding orientation with me. So that's basically what I've been doing alongside working with Sarah and helping roll out the survey. But if you know of any partners or yourself have not officially joined, I guess, quote unquote, the network, feel free to visit our webpage. It's linked there at the bottom, and fill out the form so you can officially join. And I welcome you to join one of my onboardings and provide any feedback as you join the network and see what the work is about. So I guess that's kind of in a nutshell where I'm at with network development. Sorry for the technical difficulties, and I hope this was better.
Perfect. Thank you, Veronica. And I encourage any board members, any questions, make sure you reach out and or connect with Veronica, join one of the orientations. We really, we're starting to work and grow this network, so it's exciting to see as we continue to add people what this is going to look like and really getting individuals involved. Next slide. So I won't spend as much time on this because Sarah has some time later on the agenda, but also just want to give a shout out that our well-being survey is live, and just a reminder to all to continue to share it out and get it out across our network of partners and community. So, but I will save all the thunder for Sarah later on in the presentation. Next slide. And Molly, welcome. I saw Molly joined as well. A few other just quick updates and notifications. As you guys know, at the start of the year, we've had a partnership with the NCW Tech Alliance. And I just wanted to do a quick call out that they are doing a digital equity commitments campaign in 2024. We can send some of this information out. If you aren't getting the Tech Alliance newsletters, it's a great source of information to get up to speed on the work that they're doing around digital navigation, digital equity, and to be honest, anything technological that you might need support of. They are a great source for education, learning, and collaboration. So really encourage you guys to connect with them. Also, just want to give a shout out to Wendy. She did a presentation at the NRTRC conference, which I might have to actually ask Wendy what that acronym stands for. Wendy, can you tell me?
It's the Northwest Regional Telehealth Resource Center conference. So the Telehealth Resource Center is one of several in the states, and it covers Utah, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska, I believe.
So I asked her to message me her presentation title. She said she didn't select this, but it was Thriving Together in Rural Washington, Transforming Access to Care Through Telehealth and Community Relationships. So I just want to give a shout out, because it's just another example of how our team is getting the word out about the great work that we're doing in our region, which again, in a lot of ways, it's just demonstrating the work that we're doing here is starting to get picked up across the state and across the nation. And we're not only impacting lives locally, but we're getting an opportunity to impact lives in a broader way. If you go to the next slide. A few other just quick shout outs. May 9th, we had an opportunity to have Kyron Nixon and Emma Oppenheim from the Healthcare Authority come, and we did a tour with them of Chelan and Grant County, specifically the jail. So we had a chance, this was really about reentry work that's coming as part of the upcoming waiver. And so we had a chance to meet with the Chelan County jail staff. Deb Miller from Action Health Partners was able to join us. Victor, later on, Victor Estrada from the Women's Resource Center was able to join us as a whole. And we were able to really talk about our reentry work and our community-based care coordination work. Alia from Advance as well was able to join later on when we had a meeting with Action Health Partners. Actually, Alia joined us for the whole day from Advance to really be part of the recovery work and the reentry work. Then we had the opportunity to drive over to Grant County Jail and meet with the Grant County Jail staff, and then drive down to Renew and meet with Dell and his team with Renew Behavioral Health, really with a focus on recovery and reentry work throughout the course of the day. We're gonna have an opportunity in August to drive up and meet with Okanagan County Jail and any partners up in Okanagan County Jail. I'm hoping to coordinate sometime with the Colville Tribal Jail as well. Really starting to share what work is going on under this reentry work with the Healthcare Authority and the upcoming waiver, as well as just really connecting on reentry work across the region. Other thing, Joey got a chance to present April 10th at the State Board of Health meeting, really sharing his experience on the recovery work, his personal experience with lived experience. And so they're doing some recommendations up to the state that the Board of Health submits every year, I believe, or every couple of years, and so we were able to present to the State Board of Health. Joey's recommendations were able to get infused in their statewide report as well. So just wanted to give a big shout out to Joey for the work that he did on that as well. Next slide. And then just a few dates to share with you guys. Again, the Wellbeing survey is live and right now it's open through July 31st. So make sure you share it out. In June, this June, we'll be finalizing our annual report, so you will be seeing that coming through before the end of the month. Excuse me. July 1st is really that, I put it in quotes, the readiness date for the Healthcare Authority waiver work, health-related social needs work. So we actually submitted last Friday a document to the state for what was called our readiness review, which is really outlining the work that we've been doing in our region to get ready for this waiver work. And so they will be spending the next few weeks reviewing it, providing any recommendations back. We are happy to share that readiness review with the board as well if they'd like to get a deeper dive into some of the work that has been going on in our region. And then just again, another reminder, July 30th and 31st, the Community Partnership for Transition Solution Summit, which is the statewide transition work, is going to be in Wenatchee, Washington. Joey, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about the summit. I know you're on the planning committee, so I'd give you an opportunity to put your own little promo out there. If you are there, I saw Joseph Hunter's name once, but now I don't know if I can see him or not. All right, we will move on. So Joey is normally not shy, so I'm assuming that he had to step away from his computer for a second. And that I let the whole board know that. Next slide. Any questions? All right, with that, I'll turn it. Well, Ray, do you have a question?
Yeah, do you want the board to attend July 31st summit?
You know, I think it would be nice to have at least a few board members involved if you're able to make it. If it's really more, it's a re-entry focused summit. So if that's within your scope and work, then it's probably, at least you're gonna get more applicability out of it. But it's always nice to have board members and to know and involved in what's going on in our region. The interesting thing is the CPTS was, it's a separate statewide initiative that's been going on for a number of years. And so it has always been separate than it was separate than the reentry work that was going on with the state healthcare authority. You know, in some ways, our ability to be part of this has helped merge and bring some of that together. So the healthcare authority is going to be a keynote speaker on it, specifically around the reentry work that is going on at the state level. So you would actually learn a little bit more about that, as well as really understanding, I would say in some ways, more of that grassroots work that's going on around reentry in our state.
But we are not hosting it at the beginning.
We're not hosting it, no, we're not in charge. We're happy to support, but we don't have to plan every conference or meeting in our region. And encourage that we don't plan every conference or meeting in our region. All right, I'll turn it back to Linda.
All right. I see we have Blake on here. So Blake is going to share with us the work that you're doing for advocacy.
All right, great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Linda and John and everyone for hosting me here. I'm just going to pull this up on full screen mode here.
Do you want me to get like a brief intro?
That would be awesome. I would love intro. Thank you, John.
Sorry, I just wanted, I whispered over to Blake, just wanted to get everyone or remind everyone that we had shared in meetings past that we were contracting with a advocacy consulting firm to do advocacy and lobbying up at Olympia this next year. And so Blake is our, what I call you a principal in charge of our contract?
Sure.
Does
Yeah,
that sound?
has an
He's our,
extra-
I've never asked him what his formal title is.
Senior associate.
Senior associate, to our contract focus on this work. And our ultimate goal really is to develop a rural regional advocacy policy agenda that we can have to support at the statewide level, which I will say is gonna be, we've heard a number of people who are really looking at how they can better get involved and how we can better support them in their advocacies at the state level, which is really, really exciting. But the tough thing is gonna be is with such a broad geographic region, with so many partners involved in this work, how do we figure out how to boil it down to a manageable list of policy priorities that then we can take and focus and advocate on? And that is
Their job.
Blake's job, and I will turn it over to Blake
Thank you.
with that expectation in mind.
Much appreciated. Well, it's good to see everyone. I know a lot of you, and I know not a lot of you as well. So I'm just gonna do a brief introduction of our firm. My name's Blake, and I'm a senior associate consultant lobbyist. We have a lot of titles with Lodestar Partners. We're a consulting firm, first lobbying firm as well, based here in Washington State. We help with direct lobbying and advocacy work, which is a lot of what we'll be doing here, but also general government affairs, consulting, business development, and economic development as well. We have a lot of clients across a large policy spectrum, with all of our unique backgrounds and perspectives. We bring to the firm. There's 4 of us, well, 3 of us full time, and we have a 4th, and I'll talk about that in a second. We represent local governments, private business, and nonprofits. In K through 12 and higher education, a lot of climate change or climate and clean energy clients, venture capital and entrepreneurship, workforce development and technology, and we have housing. Here in the region, we represent the city of Leavenworth, specifically on affordable housing issues and efforts. In policy, we have the Chelan Douglas Regional Port Authority, and also have worked with Rural People's Platform, which is the 501c3 arm of Rural People's Voice, specifically doing what was called a Healthy Homes Initiative, and that we were doing a needs assessment to look at what we need to be doing regionally within essentially the same service areas as Thriving Together NCW, to ensure that folks, especially from underserved communities, are taking advantage of some of these direct-to-consumer home energy system tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act. So that was a really fun project. And then just more nationally, statewide, we represent Rivian Automotive, McKinstry, Northeastern University, and a few others. So this is our team. Brian Bonlander is our founder and principal. He worked with Governor Inslee for decades, first working for him in Congress, kind of moving up the ranks to his chief of staff, and then was our state director of the Department of Commerce for 6 years before opening Lodestar Partners. Molly Keenan has her own consulting firm, but also contracts and subs with us. And she has a background in Governor Inslee's administration as well, both in the official and campaign side of things. I'll talk about me in a second because I'll be your point person. And then we just hired this last session, Cassie Saganek. I spelled her name wrong. I noticed a couple typos here actually, so sorry about that. But Cassie has a background working as an executive assistant in a consulting firm and is also an Army veteran. So my background, really briefly, I was a legislative assistant. That's when I started my career in public policy for then Representative Brad Hawkins, and I worked for him until through his first year of his first term as a state senator. I held a few different positions in the office of the governor, ending as his outreach director, but I was based in Spokane, so a lot of that work was in north central Washington. I represented the governor on also 19 counties east of the Cascade Mountains, so it was a lot of traveling, but it was a really great experience, and hopefully will be helpful in the work that we're doing here, some of those relationships that were built. And then I've also worked for the county, for Chelan County, doing economic development briefly with NCW Tech Alliance, and then here we are. So something, I'm just diving kind of right into it, that John and I have discussed, I guess, over the last 8 months that we've been talking about doing this work together, is what is truly the difference between advocacy and lobbying. And I'm not going to read every bullet here because it's all in front of you and you can see it, but essentially advocacy is the grassroots public organization campaign work, raising awareness effort that comes to supporting policy and implementing effective policy change. Lobbying is going to be what I do and my colleagues do to specifically target some of the broad advocacy goals that we've established as an organization to turn into specific actionable items, policy change, statutory change, or direct funding requests to support projects. So these are not necessarily two in the same. Lobbying can be two in the same, but a lot of the work that we'll be doing right now will be advocacy, laying the groundwork until the legislative session in January. And then that lobbying effort will really start coming into play once this board has adopted an official list of priorities, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And we start engaging the legislative delegation and some of our legislators across the full legislature this fall leading up to session.
Like, for those who might be new to this, could you, like, during legislative session, could you just give an example of advocacy and an example of
Yes.
lobbying?
Yeah, so an example of advocacy would be, and then there's a bullet on this later, but for, if this organization, if we wanted to do what could be called a hill climb or a lobby day or advocacy day, but it would be members of Thriving Together NCW, potentially the board or some of the partner organizations or the CHIs throughout the region coming together and splitting up and marching up all on the Capitol and meeting with legislators to educate and inform on some of the broad policy areas of our legislative agenda. So I think that could be advocacy. Advocacy could be if there is a particular bill that we were supporting as an organization or a funding effort, trying to mobilize grassroots partner organizations to write in, call legislators, potentially fill out a form letter that goes out to legislative delegations to advocate for a specific policy area or priority. And then lobbying again would be me in the halls chasing down Senator Warnick and her colleagues.
And potentially proposing.
Yes, exactly.
Potentially proposing bills or.
Bills.
Exactly, bills, or if Thriving Together had a specific program, you needed matching funds or
Budget
seed funds.
proposals.
Yep, budget proposals and doing that, getting involved in the budgeting process. Ray, I see your hand up there.
Yeah, so just confirm you are willing to maybe help write some bills or for legislature so like maybe with a champion like Senator Warnick or other ACHs.
Absolutely, yes, we have done that. An example of something that we've done for a client in recent years was Chelan Douglas Regional Port Authority. We had to introduce and pass a bill that would allow for a levy equalization. So this is two local governments that have come together to functionally work together. But Chelan and Douglas County were paying separate, we're paying, there was a difference in the tax rate that the constituents were paying in each of those jurisdictions. And so there was a bill passed to allow statutorily the Regional Port Authority to be able to levy the equal rate between those two jurisdictions. So that's probably not the most direct example, but yes, long story short, that is what we were willing to do. And we're also would be very open and hopefully be able to get involved in the budget process to get some dollars into Thriving Together or partner organizations to do the great work that you're doing in the region.
Okay, let's meet. Let's go.
Yeah, right. All right, I like it. Any other questions on this slide before I move on to the next one?
Senator Warnick.
Senator.
Yeah, sorry, I got this new Zoom thing and I can't figure out how to raise a hand, virtual hand. So, thank you for introducing yourself, Blake. I may have met you along the way when you were working with Senator Hawkins, but the biggest problem I have as being on Ways and Means is knowing if there's a budget proviso that you either support or don't support, or if there's a proviso that would impact Thrive and or any work that we do, because those budgets come out, they get changed, and so I don't know how closely you watch those, but sometimes I just don't see them. in time to really know what it is that would help.
Sure,
Or hurt,
absolutely.
or hurt.
Absolutely, yeah, we are definitely, we will be involved in that budgeting process, either working, if we have a proviso directly that we're requesting, through, in constant communication with the member, who has sponsored that request, or, if we're going to be collaborating perhaps with another organization that has a legislative champion for that proviso. So we get involved with that process early on, and we'll help track that along the way. But as soon as those budgets are released, we are just going through each budget, like beach combing them, to make sure that, hey, this is in the House proposal, this is in the Senate proposal, and then also in the conference proposal as well. So we definitely are very engaged. And we'll be keeping, there's 3 legislative districts that cover the Thriving Together service area, and my job will be to ensure that all 9 of you will be informed and up to speed on some of the Thriving Together policy priorities, and have nothing slips through the cracks.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Can I give just like a few quick examples of what has kind of been in the budget in the past?
Yes, absolutely.
So to Senator Warnick's question, just a few things to kind of think about a little bit is even the Medicaid waiver, even though that is federally funded, it still requires authorization at the state level. So I recognize that that's been in the budget year after year as well. So the more we could keep Senator Warnick informed on either supporting that, or there was actually a portion at one point in time where some of it didn't get fully approved, and we took a neutral stance on it. Just keeping you aware of that would be very, very useful. Another thing that happened not this last legislative session, but the year before that, is the coalition of AC just ran a bill through the legislature to keep our B&O tax exemption for this last waiver. And so that did go through, and that did get approved. But if that wouldn't have gone past, any funding we would have received as part of this new waiver, we would have been subjected to B&O tax for. And so the legislature did update that information.
So I could just make a comment about what Senator Warnick said too, in that many of you know that in the early learning world, I do lots of advocacy there. And I would say that what she's saying is also even difficult for those of us. Like, there was a proviso for coalitions in the early learning world last year, and to keep track of it throughout the session until the end, it was never reported like out to, I mean, in all the places I knew to search, I could follow bills and I could follow where they were in the budget. But the proviso was really hard to figure out where it was sitting and what was happening with it along the way. So until the very end. And then at the very end, all of a sudden it was like, oh, it passed, but it only passed for this amount of money, but that's gonna happen anyway. But just being aware of it, because I kept wanting to say, is it time to write a letter? Is it time to do these things with that proviso? And because there was no way to keep track of it. So I guess that's kind of what she's saying, but also as an advocate, that was difficult for me as well.
It's absolutely challenging. I think one, probably right up front too, one of the most, and I was going to come back to it, but this is a great segue to that. Really important thing that I forgot to mention is that I do live here in Wenatchee. I was born and raised in this valley, but every session I go and I live in Olympia full time. And so we're in the halls and we're having those conversations and searching and utilizing those tools. We use a tool called Fast Democracy. We're probably going to change to actually a state tool, or a tool that was developed by developers here in Washington specifically to track Washington legislature bills. But we have those avenues or those tools to utilize as well, but we're also in the hallways and asking members to, and I'm sure Senator Warnick gets lots of notes off the floor in committee to step out to make sure that, hey, we had a discussion about this proviso earlier on in session. An example of that, and I won't name legislators here, but there was a legislator for another client we have, a nonprofit, who was going to sponsor a $500,000 program request. And he was, I already said he there, but he was super excited about it. And then we just weren't seeing a lot of response after that, and we weren't seeing and we had a Senate sponsor already, and ultimately we were successful in this proviso. But right in the 11th hour, when there was the deadline that the legislators had to submit that proviso, we had another legislator who's a good friend of mine who was ready to sponsor that. And we finally got confirmation, hey, this legislator's not actually going to sponsor that. And so we were able to go and pull the other member out of the hall and be able to submit it with a couple hours left to go. So it's probably a long-winded example, but an example of the effectiveness of having folks in there sitting at the halls and stalking the legislators to be able to get some of these things across the finish line and being kind of part of those conversations as much as they'll let you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the value of reporting that out at some point, even
Yes.
is really helpful to those that are out there trying
Of course.
to do the advocacy.
Yeah, and that's something that a weekly report is something that we do for our clients. They're typically general, but are tailored to our clients. But I'm also very happy to provide more detail bi-weekly or even a monthly report. We're going into a longer 105-day legislative session this year. And that's something if the board is interested in, I can talk with John what that format would look like, but that would include some of those conversations where I think, to what Senator Warnick said too, what could be helpful or, maybe things that might not be helpful to include won't necessarily be included in writing that we can talk about. So. All right. So we want to know what these legislative priorities are that we're advocating for. And in the given this organization's focus on the seven vital conditions for health and well-being in NCW communities, that is what we suggested in our proposal as a framework or an outline to inform what these listed legislative priorities might look like. It might not be broken down specifically in every category. It might be some examples that were included, and I won't go through every single the 7 vital conditions, but for basic needs, health and safety, that could be supporting a policy addressing healthcare accessibility. Telemedicine could be part of this. It could be broad, supporting funding for this work happening at the state level. It could be specific to a program that's being executed here in the North Central Washington region. For humane housing, supporting affordable workforce housing policies. That could be infrastructure incentives. Infrastructure also could be part of basic needs. This is a conversation we had with Ruben and Steve with the Chelan Douglas Chai recently. We met to just briefly talk about some of this work, and a lot of our conversation was around infrastructure needs and how that really supports the health and well-being of communities. So again, it could be but back to humane housing. Could be very broad. Hey, please, legislature, support incentives for both for-profit and nonprofit developers to build, or it could be specific saying, and that incentive is this workforce housing accelerator that was established last session, but needs to be funded to the tune of $500 million this year to have effective results. So that could be what that looks like. And let's see, what else did I write here? So before the next slide, one thing that I'm really excited about, so most clients, when they do hire us, they have very specific requests, or they know what they want in the legislature, right? They'll say, hey, we're trying to get money for this infrastructure project or this economic development thing, or we're trying to pass this policy that will help our software thrive and help us sort of business development in Washington State, or gain access to a market that doesn't exist. What I'm really excited about Thriving Together in this work is that we're identifying that from the ground up and going to be engaging with partners across a really large region. 7 vital conditions. I mean, you could really look at nearly every single non-government organization, nonprofit serving their communities in North Central Washington, and they would fall under one or all or part of these categories. So it's really exciting work. It's the bread and butter of what we do as consultants, and so I'm stoked and very excited to do that work. How we're going to do that, what we propose, is forming this legislative steering committee. And this is just a sketch of what that could look like. What we know for a fact is that that 2 of the 3, and I'm meeting with Alana and Michelle next week to talk about Okanagan's participation, but that the CHIs, as really the boots on the ground folks and partner organizations throughout the North Central Washington region will have a voice and a vote or participating role on the steering committee. John and I have discussed how it'd be great to have a board member or two involved in these conversations. And then all those little people connected by lines are going to be partner organizations and nonprofits that work with Thriving Together, maybe have, perfect, love it, love the enthusiasm, right? And what this will look like is that I will be working with the members of the steering committees. John and staff here at Thriving Together have put together kind of this preliminary list of organizations throughout the region that would be great to essentially meet with and interview and try to hear from their perspective what the most pressing issues where state government could step in to benefit work in progress in their region. You know, what are those issues in your community? But also we'll have a list of questions to help guide that conversation. And, you know, for here in the Chelan Douglas region, an example of this would be meeting with NCW Tech Alliance, which I am this week, to talk about broadband equity and digital navigation, and some of the challenges that they have faced with trying to secure state funding. When I worked there, that was one of those years as well. So I have some experience there. I think just, again, what I'm really excited about that Thriving Together is step forward. I mean, togetherness, it's literally in your name and in your organizational mission, is that this is unique because any nonprofit can hire consultants to go and secure funding for them. Thriving Together is giving a voice to a collective group or collaborating with a bunch of organizations that might have the resources and just be partnering, or might be under-resourced and might know where to go in Olympia, but don't have the money to hire a consultant firm or be present there during, you know, every single week. So being able to help some of the more under-resourced nonprofit organizations have a voice in Olympia is something that I'm really passionate and excited about. So that is so the framework of this, though. So I've talked a lot about who we're going to be meeting with. This is modeled after some of the lodging tax advisory committee work at counties and cities. So from some of the experience when I worked at Chelan County, the steering committee will meet with all of these partner organizations and then bring back all of these, you know, the findings of suggested legislative priorities, policy issues, funding requests, and then pull together a list, a palatable list of recommended priorities to submit to the board for final
I'll go with you.
consideration.
It's not a problem.
This could be 10 priorities, it could be 5, it could be 3 very specific ones. We need 2 million for this, 500,000 for this.
I'm gonna put in my,
Or it could be very broad, like we talked about earlier, and just tied to some of those 7 vital conditions. But I think we want this to be able to be digestible for our legislators and be able to fit on one page so we can effectively communicate that message. And then that would be taken again to the board, and then the board can either amend and or adopt that list of legislative priorities. As far as a timeline here, and I didn't include a slide for this, but I would love to see this steering committee meet several times throughout the spring and summer. I guess summer now is quickly approaching us, and by October, there is an official adopted list of legislative priorities by this board, so we can start engaging our legislators here in the region, and also some of the budget chairs and relevant committee chairs, perhaps in the fall. There's this fine kind of line, or this time period in November where I think there's a lot of activity getting ready for session, and then Thanksgiving rolls around and it is radio silence, and then maybe another week of, hey, let's do this again, and then the holidays roll around and it is again quite quiet until everyone's moved over to Olympia and the gavel slams down for the session to begin. So that is what I have for the steering committee process. I do have the slide for questions, but I'm just happy to take questions now too, if anyone has a specific question about the legislative steering committee, what I've outlined here, and before I move on to how we're going to engage our legislators.
I think I just wanted to acknowledge Teresa put in the chat
Oh,
that
yeah.
I have a public health policy analyst that she is trained, but would love to get her involved in this work.
That's great. I think that would be a great person to meet with in this steering committee process, and we can also offline and talk about what that involvement in the steering committee could look like. Thank you, Teresa.
So who do we let know if we want to be involved in that process?
John,
You
I'll
let me
defer to
know.
you. Was that you?
I mean, yes,
Okay, perfect.
and I mean, if we get that many board members interested, we'll figure out how we end up with the 2 or 3 to be on there, but I know Emilio, you've expressed interest, so I have your name down.
I still know staff, no legislature, and I know, I recognize you.
Yeah, I recognize you too.
So
And,
I
and
think we can help each other.
yeah, no, that's perfect. I think that this, and that, this doesn't mean that there has to be 5 people. That is the only graphic I could find that worked on Canva. So, you know, it could be 7. I think when you get too many cooks in the kitchen, I want a home kitchen, not a commercial kitchen here probably. And I think that, you know, and so we can talk about that, but I think it would be really great, to be able to get involved in, especially folks that want to be part of this work that's just going to result, well, it's going to just turn in positive results. So it's very exciting. So in engaging, so this steering committee, we're gonna identify legislative priorities. We're gonna have this great sheet. What do you do with it? And these are just some ideas. It's going to be, there's gonna be a lot more than this, but just what I jotted down again, what fit on the slide. I think there should be, and again, there's a typo here. It should be the 13th legislative district. Senator Warnick, you're not off the hook. So the 7th, 12th, and 13th districts are the legislative districts that encompass, or I guess I should say that bargain together service area it encompasses. But I think, you know, we're during one of these board meetings in the months leading to session, it would be really great to have an invite to our legislators and be able to have a formal presentation of those legislative priorities. I'm happy to do that presentation. I think it's far more effective to have the board do it directly, or staff than yourself. One-on-one meetings, that definitely would be where I would come in, and potentially John. That could be beforehand, you know, driving up to Quincy and having coffee with Representative Ibarra at the Quincy Public Market before session, or in Olympia, which leads into the lobbying in Olympia, a bullet there, and going and just meeting with all 9 members of the 3 legislative delegations, office to office in the early weeks of session, and following up with staff. And then catching legislators in the hall as well to inform and educate on the Thriving Together list of priorities. Then the last 2 here, I talked about the Advocacy Day, providing testimony. That is something that I absolutely will do on behalf of Thriving Together. If there's a bill, specific bill that's been identified, or one that comes up along the way that the board wants to take an official position on, or in a budget bill, like Senator Warnick had mentioned, when the budgets are out, going and providing support for a specific budget proviso in that bill. But I also find it very effective and very well received when there can be a member of the board or staff or a partner organization providing that testimony. And that's something that I can write completely, can help coach. I can stay out of the way and just give talking points. But I find the testimony engagement very helpful. This is a huge region, a very remote region in areas. There is remote testimony now after the coronavirus that is available for every committee. Beforehand, it was only a handful in the Senate. I think that allowed for that. So being in person is always great. Show you a great time in Olympia. It's a cool spot. But you can also zoom in, and it's just as effective, and you heard just as much.
You can all go on Potato Day.
Yes, it's a great day to go. Beef day with the Cattlemen's Association's there, smoking brisket at like 5 a.m. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And Dairy Day is another good one, although I kind of a little lactose intolerant. But there's a lot of great advocacy days, and then probably the best one this year will hopefully be the Thriving Together NCW Advocacy Day. All right, and that I do have just my blank questions here. I'm just going to stop there. I think I've probably eaten up every inch of my time, but are there any questions from anybody here?
I think you have
All right.
one really strong, enthusiastic board member, but I don't know who it is.
I'm all about it, right? It's great.
Are they joining with other ACHs in some of this work, right? Don't they have advocacy?
So, yeah, so the coalition of ACHs, we also have a contract with Melanie Smith, who is a lobbyist. And so we've done just at least a brief connection with Blake and Melanie. What we'll want to make sure on is that we're aligning so that we're never in an instance where we have conflicting policy agendas that would cause more harm than good. I would say the coalition is really always going to be at that broader statewide level. So a lot of the stuff we're talking about right now focuses a lot on ensuring advocacy and alignment with our waiver work around community-based care coordination efforts. They're gonna be a little bit more broader than really what we're doing here, which is gonna really have a regional focus. But we always gonna wanna stay in alignment. We're always wanna make sure that when we get those agendas and those policy agendas developed, that there is nothing that would risk having a conflict between the two.
And I know that, well, definitely we'll be working with Melanie, and John made that connection for us a couple weeks ago. A good example of that is representing the Chelan Douglas Regional Court, but then also working with the Washington Public Courts Association. We're not always completely in lockstep, but there are things that we can help each other on, and that relationship, that line of communication is incredibly helpful. And then I know there are some other ACHs that have representation. I know Better Health Together, and then also is it Healthier Now in King County? Healthier Here, thank you. They are looking at obtaining representation too, or retaining representation. All right.
Senator Warnick, I guess this might be a Blake and you question at the same time, but it might be good for us to get together offline, because one of the things I'm curious about is, as we're developing this and we're meeting with legislators, what I'd actually like to know too is how informed do you want to stay in these discussions to ensure that we never catch you off guard? And another legislator comes up to you and says, hey, I just met with John and Blake and they were talking about this, and you go, I have no clue about that.
Yeah, and you know, as up to date as you can keep me, that would be good. I don't need to be in all the meetings.
Are you sure?
We'd love to have you.
Yeah, but you know, if there is something that pops up that's going to be a priority, it would sure be nice to know ahead of time. You know, the budget's going to be a bit of a challenge this year because we don't know for sure who's going to be writing the budget. Governor Inslee will be proposing a budget, but it will not be his budget in the end. So that gets to be a bit of a challenge. So
We didn't want to do anything easy.
no, but it depends on who the new governor is. So, but yeah, as you know, if you find something that you think I need to be aware of, be sure and let me know. We're going to have a new senator from the 12th district too. So that's going to take some educating, I think, for him or her or whoever. I know that the one that I'd like to see be the senator. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, as if you think there's something I need to be aware of, just give me a holler.
Perfect.
So, okay.
Some of us don't get to vote for that anymore.
Yeah.
We're interested in how voting is going to be in Wenatchee, since depending on where you live, depends on who you vote for now.
Yeah.
Exactly. I have a little bit of East Wenatchee now. At least the last time I saw it. They've moved.
The airport, yes.
The airport.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the airport and down by Rock Island, I think. So it's getting very interesting. So
Right. Linda, I think it is back to you.
Back to me. All right. And now I'm going to pass the baton to Manuel for our Chelan Douglas Chice seat.
Good afternoon, everyone. All right, so you saw in the packet, the proposal from the governance committee with the Chai seat, nominating Ruben Bentacourt to replace Nancy Spurgeon as their representative on the governance board. So we reviewed it, had no concern, and I'm happy to bring it forward to board a vote and approval to accept Ruben. Ruben's with us today. I see him on the screen. If you just want to say hi, Ruben. The profile and information in the packets covers it pretty well, but just so you know, I know Ruben as well, having worked with him in the past, and highly recommend him as a member of this board. So John or Linda, I'll let you call the approval vote then.
Right. Thank you. Well, I will entertain a motion for the approval of Ruben for our Chelan Douglas, I believe, technically, chai seat.
Nancy, Linda, this is Manuel. I so moved.
Right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Right. Thank you, Senator Warnick. We have it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
If I can just say, as excited as I am to have Ruben, I'm equally as sad to have Nancy step off the board. So I just wanted to call out how great it's been to have Nancy on the board as well. And, you know, wish we could have both, but I'll just leave it at that.
So we'll just trade places. I'll just be your community member.
I was gonna say, can't we have some at-large positions?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like there might be some open positions, Nancy.
Yeah, maybe from AHEC, I can look at it that way. So we can talk about that later, but this is appropriate for for Ruben to be definitely moving into this position. And I highly recommend him as well.
That's it. Just needed to put that out there.
Thank you. But we need to.
So we gotta go to the vote.
Okay, we ready? All right, all those in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Look at us go. Welcome, Ruben. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I think you're getting the worst end of this deal with Nancy leaving. Just true transparency there. She is amazing, and I'm excited to continue to work with her as she still is our lead for our Chelan Douglas Chai Leadership Board.
Awesome. All right. Okay, Sarah, Wellbeing survey update.
Yes, I will share my screen. All right, Mariah, which option do I choose?
Just share screen, the big green button.
I know, just that. So make sure I start. All right. So very exciting to have the North Central Washington Wellbeing Survey up and going. As of today, we have 781. There's probably more if I check this very seconds. Completed online, and we have multiple, probably hundreds of paper surveys that we are collecting from our partners. We just got another big bunch, and I'm excited for Kara to start entering all of those paper surveys. That's one way she's going to be helping us out. And just a reminder that this survey can be accessed through QR codes, web links, and paper copies. And if you need help getting any of those things, QR codes, Kara or myself can help you get those. And all those versions are available in English, Spanish, Russian, Ukrainian, and Vietnamese. And there are some incentives. Anyone who completes the survey is entered to win a $100 Visa gift card. There's also Thriving Together NCW swag available. So if you're helping to distribute the survey and would like to have some swag to hand out as well, we can get that to you. And we've also agreed to provide some dinners for participants at some of the larger egg camps in conjunction with, CBCH and the Chelan Douglas Health District who are doing clinics. So if that's something that interests you and that's something that you would want us to possibly help contribute to, please be in contact. We're happy to help with ideas such as that to help build capacity, or if financial capacity needs are needed in order to get this survey out. So just a reminder, again, the survey rollout is May 1st through July 31st. Although there is possibly some collection that will happen after July 31st, especially around back to school programs or really large community events. The survey might continue to be available in order just to cover all areas of our region sufficiently. Our goal is to survey between 1% to 2% of our region's population. So that's looking at about 2,500 to 5,000 surveys with really targeted distribution across the region based on geography and also demographics, which we'll go into a little bit today. And we're really emphasizing strategic engagement with those we know haven't been heard from and trying to reduce any harmful surveillance using trusted connections with our partners. So just a quick look at where we are with geographic distribution. So our targets are based off of the American Community Survey numbers from 2022. So that's saying that Chelan Douglas residents make up 29.76% of the region. And this is what our percentage for the survey response has been. So we're not too far off. We definitely would love to see a greater response in Okanagan County. So we'll definitely be putting some emphasis in the next month or two on Okanagan County and making sure that we're really reaching out to the residents there. And we haven't specifically reached out with the Colville Reservation and therefore have no target percentage. We would love, of course, to get as much as possible, but all of that data will go directly to the tribes to decide how they want to use that data, and it will not be shared publicly unless they want us to. Also, feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. I'm just going to go through a little bit, just showing some of the percentages and what distribution looks like across some of the different demographic questions. So looking at age range, you can see we have all of the age ranges covered. I'm still looking for those 85 and older respondents, which might be difficult. John's going to go visit the senior home later. So
I should go with you.
And then looking at race, allowing any people, respondents can check multiple boxes. Also, it's very obvious that women like taking surveys more than men. I was at an event this last weekend in Chelan, and I would see a beautiful family walk up, and the husband would hand the survey to the wife to fill out. And so it made a lot of sense why our percentages are pretty much 75% female, 25% male.
Behind every good man.
75% to 25?
Yeah,
Holy moly.
so.
To make you feel like you need to
Fill it out.
out your game.
I need to be talking to somebody.
We also have a varied distribution of our sexual orientation. Kind of expected, and also a fairly diverse distribution across education level and household income. So we also this is how many, looking at actual household makeup. So the typical 2 to 4 person households. And then number of dependents also. So, my question now is to the board members of, do you have any recommendations for how to reach out to our residents based on what you've seen here? And if you are able to help with survey distribution, I know many of you have already begun and are doing great work. Are there any supports that you need from us?
So one of the things I thought that was interesting is the number of people in Grant County. Was there some significant event that was supported?
I think we just have really great partners.
Okay, yeah,
who
that's
are
pretty exciting.
putting out
I mean,
this survey.
Jordan and I did quite a bit at the
Yeah.
Scrubs Camp, and that's where we got a lot of high school kids answering it.
Nice.
I will tell you, Jordan's method is just to walk up to somebody and say, I'm gonna text you. And people do it right in front of him. Yeah, he just says, I have the survey, would you do this for me if I text it to you right now? And so that actually seems to work pretty effective, because people just stand there and then do it.
I do recognize that it does take somewhat of an extroverted personality.
Yeah.
Distribute the survey. It would have been very easy for me to have just sat in my booth this weekend in Chelan and watched people walk by. But luckily I am an extrovert and I would continuously reach out and, mention the $100 gift card. I went and delivered the individual QR codes to each of the vendors who were also, had times where they'd just be sitting there kind of waiting for the next person to walk by. And so it does require some actual input to get it out there. So
yeah,
I'm very appreciative of everyone who has signed on to help with this.
So another group that I thought of for this summer, potentially, although it's only July, but is contacting the Migrant Head Start program that's here in town and finding out about when their parent meetings are.
Yeah.
And going to those parent meetings, I think would be a good.
And the strategies,
Yes.
Yeah.
they're very much like, you really came home and you said, guy gets it and gives it to the, to the wife. It's also them understanding what's in it for them.
Right.
And for me, sometimes it's like, you're gonna get greater access, you're gonna get to be heard. And how to say that within my community, I know, and I'm sure Ruben and others have, ideas as well. But there's a lot of, like Cafe has a mercadito once a month. And I work at the World Building. There's a special reporter, Spanish speaking, who's doing an internship. Kind of going through her and kind of, and I run into her in the building and I'll talk to her about it. Cause I think that sometimes we say, oh, somebody else did it. And especially in the summer comes along and it's the season and people get busy. But I think if we go through avenues where your voice is important, and this is why, we'll but I'll work on those two.
Perfect.
Discuss it.
I know at the college, one of the ways I sold it to getting even the president to do it was to say that this data would be available for the college as well, to be able to look at this data as well and be able to aggregate it in different ways. So I think sometimes that's also working with with agencies in our community saying, you know, this could be like aggregated in a way that you would have some data as well.
We don't feel like we own the data or anything, but
Right.
it's not proprietary, the more people that can use it, the better, and in our view, it's a way to get all those partners across the region to start looking at even how they engage communities more, right? Some do a phenomenal job. But even just thinking about looking at what your residents in your community think about thriving, I think can make an impact about how you even think about the way you do business. So it's useful for everyone to have access to it.
Wendy has a great thing she says at her meetings, if she doesn't mind saying. When she's introducing the.
Wendy,
Yeah.
are you there?
I am. I just had to find my mute. I just say, I asked them to do it, but I asked them to share it with their family and friends, so their personal relations as well as their professional relations, so that they realize it's for everyone, not just their professional networks.
But then you say something about how much, like if you get so much, then you can.
Yes,
Yeah.
I tell them that we'll have enough for the entire region, and hopefully we'll have enough for every county, and we get enough in your town, then we can aggregate it by your town. And the more we get, the deeper we're able to dive. So if you get enough, you may be able to divide it by socioeconomic or by gender or by race. So it all depends on you and how you get your survey out in your town.
I would tell you also the high school kids are very excited about entering the contest. That's right, so high schoolers, they enter those kind of things all the time, so that's fun for them. They're like, oh, okay, I'll do it.
Peter, you have a comment, question?
Oh, yeah, I was thinking about the, percentages you're showing by age and race, ethnicity. I was wondering how well those track with their prevalence in the population, and if there are particular areas where we're over or underrepresented and need to target based on what you have so far.
Yeah, there's definitely still some room for improvement. We're close to the Hispanic percentages for the region, which is about 33%, and we're right there about 28, 29. So definitely, continuing to work, but we also feel pretty good about that. That doesn't always happen in surveys to be that close to the actual percentage. And Carrot is working on getting those exact comparisons. And so we can get that information out to the board, once we have that a little bit clearer. But, there's always room for improvement in specific areas, but I think overall we're getting fairly close to where we want to be.
Also, I know that Okanagan Chai leadership is meeting tomorrow, and I know we're going to be talking about this and how to increase our numbers. So somebody will be getting back to you, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I can't overemphasize the importance of moving the idea of this survey from a work project to a personal investment. The way we're going to get really great data is if we're going and talking to our neighbors, talking to our friends, posting it on our private personal Facebook, social media accounts. Joey Hunter, he puts it on his social media and we see a huge jump. And so I just know that if Peter Morgan put it on his social media account, we just numbers in Okanagan would jump, so.
It would help if he had a social media account.
If I had one.
With the Colville tribe,
Yeah.
I definitely understand the challenge. What have you tried with them?
So honestly, it's not that we were just trying to kind of figure out some relational things in terms of who to go to, making sure that we're taking the proper steps, and with me going on maternity leave and just some time constraints, we haven't been able to get, in front of the tribal council on this specific survey, and so we just want to be very careful about how we proceed.
I had quite a few tribal members at my event, that filled out the forms as well.
Yeah, thank you, Molly.
Living in Grand Coulee, but they're from Okanagan County.
So I'm gonna actually be teaching an ECE class up there this summer, so I might be able to talk with Head Start there and not make it a big, but just have an agreement with that group to be able to do it with the students.
Yeah, and there's still opportunities, obviously, they will get first look on everything and we'll have to get permission in order to publish anything that contains Caldwell tribal data. But we're happy to be able to pass on anything that we get to them, so.
Peter, I apologize, I teased when Sarah was making the comment, I said you might get the senior population, so. And then I didn't say it loud enough for you to hear, so sorry about that comment. Now you're on mute as you're cursing me.
I said I will talk, I won't file a formal complaint.
So yeah, I highly encourage you, and I don't mind making the drive to the farthest reaches of our region, and that's what Kara's been hired for. She's hopefully got a good car to drive. And yeah, I love making the drive across the state, so feel free to reach out, get me some mileage.
She came to Freda with her sidekick, which was a bonus.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and because Rosalinda got me to Freda, all of a sudden I found myself also in Moses Lake and Quincy. So making good use of time. So any questions, concerns?
I wonder about the public market, like being at the market.
We have a few of those
Yeah.
on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, we're looking at some farmers markets across the region, definitely, large events. The event I was at was Cruise in Chelan, the car show, so.
I mean, the benefit right now, to Sarah's point, is we're not perfect, but we're generally staying relatively close to like all of the breakdown demographics, which is really, really nice, because it means we're targeting, events and groups that are really trying to get out there to our broader community. So it's not like we're getting necessarily a demographic that's more wealthy, a demographic that's generally online or anything like that. It seems like we're really getting a decent breakdown at this point. So there's targeted and small focuses we can do, but it's not a huge gap minus the 25%. Yeah.
I'm in there, that's all I gotta say.
Yeah, and also we don't know of every event happening in our region. And so if you know of an event that's happening in your community, let us know. Cause we definitely don't have every single event that's happening this summer in our region on our list, so. We'd love to have someone there, but we're definitely also using our partners. Donnie Guerrero from Molina is a huge help. He seems to be everywhere. At the same time, I don't know how he does it. But we're using our partners to distribute this survey, so. Let us know who's going to be where and when, and we'll make sure they got the survey to hand out. Okay. Linda, I think you're back.
All right, back to me. We are, look at us, 1 minute behind. That's not bad. Okay, do we want to take about a 5-minute stretch break?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back.
Grab some coffee. I wanted to bring more information to you today and introduce a term. We've talked about community-based care coordination.
And today we're also going to introduce a term, the social care network term, and we'll talk more about what that is. I just want to remind everyone, I was meeting with somebody recently and realized that sometimes we say waiver and we forget what the heck we mean by a waiver or why it's called a waiver. So I thought I would start with that. So there's a provision in Medicaid law that allows for federal governments to waive rules that are usually in place for Medicaid programs. So that's why it's called a waiver, because you're waiving some rules. And the intention is to allow states to accomplish certain goals. For example, reducing costs, expanding coverage, and even improving care for certain groups. So that's why it's called a waiver. I forget to mention that to people, and they always wonder, like, what is this term anyway? So before we dive into the waiver and zoom into that specific initiative, we wanted to make sure that board members have a really good handle on the big picture of community-based care coordination. So that's actually where we're going to start. And I want to apologize to the people who are listening in by phone only, because there's going to be a ton of visualization and animation that you might miss out on, but we'll make sure we send you the slide deck afterwards.
And this is recorded. So
Oh, there you go.
the recording now too.
Bring the popcorn. So we have a regional advisory committee that's been helping us make sense of this big picture, and they've been meeting since September. I want to give a shout out to Ray, our board member, who's also on that regional advisory committee. And for those in the room, I do have a little glossary for you guys to follow along with. And actually, I'm going to go grab it and put it in the chat for the rest of you. Because I think what's hard about this work is that you can quickly get lost in the terminology and even like interpret things differently and then end up having a completely different understanding of what this work is. So in the chat for everyone else, you'll see just like a 4-page glossary with typical terms. You'll see on page 1 is our definition of community-based care coordination, because starting there is important because it can also mean a lot of different things to different people. So I encourage you to reference that throughout the presentation or ask questions about terms you're seeing in the glossary, because this work is really complex and it's easy to conflate things and quickly get confused. So don't forget to ask questions throughout. So we're going to start with the big picture vision. And I'll let you all read this. I'm not going to read at you, so I'm just going to give 30 seconds or so to read that. So integrated, cohesive, and nimble social care network. That's what we're trying to organize with funds from the waiver, but also other funding streams. And you'll see that what we mean by integrated is that we really wanted to include multiple program models, different target populations, and different funders and payers. And by we want it to be cohesive. So that means, there's a lot of networks that exist, but we want to make sure that they're well connected and organized, and that's the key. So on the slide there, you'll see some color coding that we're going to make sense of during this presentation. And I'll explain a little bit what some of these colors represent. So dark green is what we're kind of calling regional system stewards, kind of plain language, and that's us thriving together. Definitely, we identify as a regional system steward, which means that we're investing in capacity building and infrastructure that benefits the whole network. It doesn't matter who you serve, what the program's called, what your workforce is called. We want to invest in the system that serves our region. So then a next level up, and this is a really important role that some of our partners play, it's what we're calling community-based care coordination program administrators. And so these are folks that manage specific programs in our region, and they contract with a high-quality network of providers to deliver those services. And this is the layer that is often thought of as the hubs or the community care hubs, the term that you'll hear in the waiver. Next level up are those contracted providers that they work with, so the community-based care coordination providers. And they provide these services through a community-based workforce. Again, the glossary has a definition of what we mean by that. And these are folks who tend to be generalists. So they ask about and help people with a little bit of everything. They're the navigators, the jack of all trades, and they're constantly checking with people to ask, do you get what you needed? And do you have more needs? And I want to give a shout out to, for example, to Molly on the phone, who's a perfect example of a community-based care coordination provider. Then the next level up, we have community resource organizations. So these are folks who tend to provide specialties, specific services. It could be a food bank, it could be a community health center, a housing specialist, childcare provider, transportation, you name it. So these are typically the people that the light green layer is referring to help people with distinct needs. So obviously, it's not that simple, and some organizations might identify with one or more of these roles and functions, but this is just kind of articulating these helps us make sense of who does what, like the roles and responsibilities across our region, and kind of make sure we're all on the same page about what we're talking about. The good news is that there are networks that already exist and that do this, but the thing that we're finding is that things out there feel very fragmented and disjointed. And we're going to tell you about a story about why that is. So again, we're going to go back into history to understand how things got the way they are. And then it'll help you understand like what an amazing opportunity the waiver is to kind of right some of those underinvestments and then do something that would work much better for the region. So 10 years ago, we have the Department of Social and Health Services, their Aging and Long-Term Support Administration, that collaborated with the Healthcare Authority to roll out this health home program across the state. And you can see there that the target population is high cost, high risk Medicare, Medicaid enrollees. And the Healthcare Authority contracted with what they called lead organizations, which included managed care organizations, but also in some regions, community-based organizations. And in our region, the community-based organization that HCA contracted with was, at the time, they were called Community Choice. Now you know them as Action Health Partners. So they were one of the lead entities managing this program in our region. And they're basically serving this role of a community care hub, which is why they're shown in blue. So then in all regions across the state, the lead organization contracts with what we're calling community-based care coordination providers, and HCA calls care coordination organizations, or CCOs, right? But in our world, they're community-based care coordination providers, they're light green. And so you can see the network that AHP began building to provide these services in our region. And we're actually just showing the 4 county regions because AHP actually manages a much larger region than our 4 counties. So these community-based care coordination providers are the ones doing the work in our 4 county region. So that was 10 years ago. And now 4 years later, along comes the waiver. And one of the elements of the waiver is a Pathways Hub program. And after a lot of deliberation with work groups and committees, the target population we ended on is Medicaid or Medicaid eligible people experiencing 3 or more emergency department visits in the last 12 months. And one of our principles
has always been to leverage and increase capacity that already exists in our regions. So during the first waiver, we chose to lean on Action Health Partners for the Community-Based Care Coordination Project, the Pathways Hub project. And they started a pilot in Grant County. They started building out a network of community-based care coordination providers. And there were some bumps in the road with the Pathways Hub program. And our board ultimately decided to discontinue the project in early 2020. But that initiated like some much larger, big picture, long-term planning, which has gotten us to where we are today. And there's been lots of work going on in the past 4 years, and Action Health Partners has been leaning into that work like very seriously. And there's some really great things that are coming out of it. Now, I remember Doug Wilson, when we had our meeting, I think it was March 2020 in Moses Lake, we shared this kind of root cause analysis, and I know some of this that might be very fine print for you. Some of you will remember this if you were there, but these are elements that we feel contributed to the Pathways Hub not working well in our region. And there were a lot of things that played into it. It was partly the target population that we picked. It was an incredibly difficult target population to start with. Competing programs, that is still kind of an issue, like how to weave those in. Training, there was a very specific training that had to be rolled out, and the demand did not, the supply did not meet the demand. The IT platform that was in use, it was like prescribed by the state, and it had some limitations. So I remember Doug Wilson saying, if and when you make improvements down the road, make sure you look back at this and make sure you've addressed some of these challenges. And so I can tell you that we have been plugging away and actively addressing these challenges so that we can ensure they're not repeated as part of the second waiver. And I want to give a huge shout out to some of our partners, including Action Health Partners, who've really been digging into how to address these. So in 2020, we discontinued the Pathways Hub, but we still have to work on community-based care coordination, and we start doing some infrastructure and capacity building. We start looking at IT infrastructure planning. We had a work group for that. We start looking into resource directory infrastructure. We had another work group for that. And then also, thanks to Joey's leadership, we also leaned into doing some recovery coach workforce trainings. And then we were able to kind of build this network. So in some ways you see like a similar structure. I didn't make us blue here because I don't think we were really providing all of the supports and functions that a community care hub would, but we were trying to we were incubating and trying new innovative ideas with these partners who were basically providing recovery coaching across the region. Okanagan Fire serves youth, and then Women's Resource Center was serving Chelan Douglas. Hope Source was Grant, I believe, as well as Renew. So there were great things going on in the community-based care coordination work post Pathways Hub. Now, the pandemic. Here comes COVID Care Connect, program of the Department of Health. You can see the target population here. And again, to stand this up and provide supports during the pandemic, DOH contracted with regional hubs. In our speech, the blue program administrators, right? So again, they really leaned on Action Health Partners to become the hub in our region and to contract with community-based care coordination providers. In DOH speak, these are called care coordination agencies, CCAs, not to be confused with care coordination organizations, which are CCOs. This is why the language gets really it becomes a big maze. And then comes along another initiative called the Recovery Navigator Program. You can see the target population there. And in our region, the funds are flowing through Chelan, and they appointed a regional recovery navigator administrator In our region, it was Advance. Again, they're playing hub functions in that they have to oversee the services and contract on the ground to make sure they're provided. So in our region, it started as a pretty small network. Cafes serving Chelan Douglas, and Advance's kind of direct service arm is serving Okanagan and Grant counties. So then we also have some recovery coaching that we fund. And again, Advance then ends up kind of taking on these contracts that we at first had incubated, but we moved over to Advance. So let's piece that whole system together. We've got us as regional infrastructure stewards. We're piloting new innovative ideas that are kind of like still in the innovation ideation stage, but then we're also contracting with organizations in our region that are community care hubs so that they can manage a great network of organizations to do the work on the ground. And I would say that we're trying to ensure that our blue partners are really well resourced to be high functioning hubs. So the MOU that you all approved as part of the consent agenda is a representation of resourcing our blue partners so they can do their work really well. And the state funds, like one of the things I want you to understand with all the history of those little programs you saw stood up is that many times the state does not adequately compensate or invest in the blue layer partners. IT platforms, sometimes they roll out a program without providing any kind of IT platform or let alone a structure for how to collect the data and the program services. And so I want to give a kudos to the Department of Health because through Care Connect, they actually did invest in that infrastructure, and also give kudos to HCA because the Waiver 2.0 includes infrastructure funding, which John will dig into a little bit later. But that's really important because otherwise you're asking AHP in Advance to manage a network without like the solid infrastructure that they need. And then it becomes really, really hard for them to manage a lot of administrative burden that they're being asked to manage on behalf of the state without the tools. I'm going to pause there. So far, are there any questions? Okay, so health home program, we've got these. COVID Care Connect, we've got these. And then recovery programs, whoops. Let's try that, let that turn orange long enough. So another takeaway for the board that I think is really important is that the state also has a tendency to create programs in silos. And that resulting fragmentation creates huge administrative burden for all of these partners. We also, in our region, being a rural region, we do not have an infinite supply of these green bubbles. So that means that we have to cross-train people to tap into multiple programs and funding sources, because that's like a key sustainability strategy. If they can't work multiple programs, then it's going to be really hard for them to sustain the workforce. And for the past 4 years, we've been chipping away at like the IT platform work, the resource directory work, and that's going to be, we're going to be in a really good position for the waiver to leverage that infrastructure. Now, the waiver renewal, otherwise known as Waiver 2.0, this is where like we start to talk about a broader social care network that we're trying to organize. And we have been thinking through like adding this yellow layer of all those community resource organizations, right? And which other bubbles should we bring into the fold to serve certain populations? And this like the infrastructure, I want you to look at this picture and then only look at the arrows. Arrows are basically the connections and the infrastructure, and it's the stuff that is often ignored and suffers from underinvestment. So it could be IT that facilitates communication. It could be like, you know, how many times have you heard people say there isn't a good source of information on like resource directories? Like there's no one resource directory and none of them are all, you know, adequate. So I don't know where to refer people to. So the waiver presents a very unique and exciting opportunity to invest in all of this, including the arrows and also especially our community care hubs, so Action Health Partners in Advance. And I think it's a huge opportunity. It's structured in a very different way than the Pathways Hub was and that the Health Home Program was. And so I think I hope that the board is really excited about the work ahead because we actually have an opportunity to do things differently and ideally, you know, meet our vision of like integrating all these pieces so they're not fragmented anymore, making them cohesive so they're not like, you know, operating in these little silos. And then having it be nimble, like operating under multiple programs and then being there to respond to public health emergencies or other needs that come up in our community. So that's the really big picture vision of the social care network. And some of you will be joining on Wednesday. We have about 40+ partners that basically represent mostly those green and yellow dots that are going to help us make sense of member commitments and how to design this in a way that makes sense. But that's kind of the overview that is like holding, like the waiver is just nested under this big picture. So remember that when John speaks. And before I turn it over to him, I want to just kind of emphasize that we as an ACH are nothing with our Blue partners. Blue partners are nothing with their CVCC providers, and CVCC providers could not do their work if those yellow dots and organizations didn't exist. So that means that we have to think about the whole thing, or if like one of those things doesn't work, the whole thing fails. So we actually have to think about every single layer. Questions? Peter.
Caroline, and I know that one of the goals is to avoid duplication of services. And I think that was one of the things about the Pathways Hub is they had a, you know, an algorithm or a way of dealing with that. How do you deal with clients who are getting services from multiple organizations so that they know what, or is there a value in each organization knowing what the other is doing for a client? That seems like a
Yes.
hard one.
There's a value, and one of the ways that we're moving towards that is that both, if I go back to here, both Action Health Partners in Advance are moving to an IT platform called VisionLink. So it's shared infrastructure. They can manage it separately, but it means that we're able to set up like notifications technically between instances so that let's say Advance gets a referral, they can ping AHP to see if they're already serving them, or HP gets a referral, they can double check and that, you know, is this person health home eligible? If they're already health home eligible, then we'll try to connect them to one of those community-based care coordinators. If they're not eligible, but they have recovery needs, then let's smart assign them to Advance, right? So the technology platforms that we're moving towards are going to enable that kind of information exchange that allows for deduplication and kind of like smart assigning across the network. And it also requires us to work really closely and cooperatively together, and Advance, AHP, and Thriving Together are very, like, we're meeting and strategizing together. In some ways, we've explained to the state that we're kind of like a hub co-op. We're really cooperating deeply on how to invest in systems together and exchange information across organizations.
Thank you.
Right.
Ray,
can't tell, but
Ray, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was gonna say really good job. Really, what we're trying to do, and hopefully we'll have this more find out on Wednesday. We have a meeting, but like the more formal we can make it, and not to create barriers, but to create venue, to build relationships, and then ensure services, right? And so all of those things are, when you're part of a cool club like this is going to be, then what ends up happening is we hold each other accountable, we help each other grow, we help each other network, we help with relationships, we can rely on each other because I'm not going to be perfect every day. Maybe John is, but I'm not. And so then we can work on that together.
no.
And so that's what I think we need to keep striving to this, and help even the smallest community-based organization who's serving, who may be just like one person or two people, and they're trying to do a good thing, how they can have a venue and how they can have support. And so anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
Thanks, Ray. No, I know I've heard you say before, like, we need a system, and I think what you mean when you say that is that, like, we need to know who does what and how we're working together, like, and all be on the same page about it, because if we're not, then it just becomes really messy and chaotic, so.
So I really appreciate this because I remember sitting in a parking lot having a conversation with you a couple years ago about ready to lose my mind about the number of people that were going to hire navigators. And I was like, oh, well, that's not really helpful to families if we have 25,000 navigators in town. I kept thinking of the person who had to use the service, right? Like I have to call this, the one in early learning they were going to set up, right? Like I gotta call this person if I have a 3-year-old, and I gotta call this person if I have a grandma living at home, and I have to call this person. So, and that was when you and I had that conversation, like, I don't want us to take any money until we figure out how locally, how is this gonna work locally? That we think of that person, that family, or those children that we're gonna serve, what's gonna work for them? You know, as funding comes in, because in my lifetime, and you've seen this as well in your lifetime, somebody comes up with a good concept and then DOH funds it, and early learning funds it, and this group over here funds it, and this group over here funds it, and then you have a bunch of silos down at the local, right?
Yep.
Where if we could start thinking smarter about how we still go for all those funding things, but think smarter about how it impacts everybody instead of just the 3-year-old. So.
Yep, and that's the vision of the social care network, that like
Right.
awareness across programs, and then having infrastructure that's like not just for one program, but like shared across different ones. And then the communication is key across partners. And I just wanna, I think we underestimate how much administrative burden is placed on organizations like Advance and Action Health Partners. And so I just wanna give them a huge shout out. I know, I think I saw Cammie on the phone, and she probably doesn't like to be seen or on video. She's a behind the scenes wizard who does an immense amount of work to untangle the crap that we get from the state. And so I just want to give them a huge shout out. Same with Alia and Advance. You know, the Recovery Navigator program is a perfect example of a program where they're like, here you go, stand up this program. And they give them no IT, no structure around data. And so they have to like figure out how to provide the services while building the infrastructure without the funds. And it's an impossible problem.
Yeah.
And it's not fair to those agencies or our community. So.
Well, and I know the conversations that we've had too, is that, you know, why are we rebuilding stuff? What I appreciate about this is it's building off of what's already in our community and just enhancing that, instead of saying, oh, let's start over with this new kind of funding and do something different.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
I think that what you're doing is, I love the way you painted it. Number one, because I think it's and I worked at the state says, oh, here's the money. And how many times did I experience providers getting money, but not knowing administratively how to connect to other services available? Recovery navigators, which I'm very intimately acquainted with, how the genesis of that is and how it's being implemented is very much so what you, the way you described. Oh, here it is, figure it out. It's like, playing, volleyball while you're, watering the lawn, walking down the street. It's too many
Yeah.
pieces moving. So I think that the key for me, what I see the key in what you're saying is create the clarity in the blueprint and then check very methodically along the way that the pieces are connected. And who best and, like we're coming in again, well, if it's 3 years old, go here. If it's a grandma, go here. It's making sure those things do connect, because there's nothing worse, and I'll finish with that, than giving somebody hope and then not being there
Right.
and not being able to come through.
Well, our recovery coach program was a good example on how, our options really to move into sustainability was really to leverage and partner with Advance to really use the infrastructure they already built to support that work, or we were gonna have to build that internally ourselves, which would have actually created an administrative burden, additional cost, again, even in the blue layer, there's only a limited number of people with that skill set that you're also pulling from each other and from your partners on, and then creating another silo. So it's really like looking at where those skill sets are in the region, who has that expertise, and working with them to build that structure out.
I also see a lot of benefits in terms of the data collection. Like Nancy was saying, when you have someone who has to reach out to multiple different agencies, multiple different times, giving out the same exact information over and over again, people do get tired. So then when, we put out our survey, they're like, "Oh, another survey, I don't want to answer any more questions." Why why don't we have that information already? Why don't you, like, I've been asked this question 100 times, why doesn't someone have that information already? So.
All right, well, John, take it away with the waiver 2.0.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, Ruben, go ahead.
Are you still building the network out, Caroline, or what does that look like to add people to your,
Oh, it's still totally a work in progress, and starting with what we have, but see all those question mark bubbles? Yes, absolutely. We have some people coming on Wednesday who are not currently in this contracted network, but who might be really good fits. So if you have ideas or folks that you're like, you should make sure you reach out to them, let me know.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
And it'll be a multi-year process, so.
A forever process. The thing I'd also call on that too, as we get into the waiver context, is one of the benefits we had was when we shifted away from the pathways to building out this more holistic CBCC infrastructure, was that we actually weren't beholden to any funder on what it looked like. So to Nancy's point, what was really nice is a lot of the structures that were built out over the 2 years was really what the region wanted and what it should look like for the region. We're actually in some ways getting lucky that the state has seen some of the work the ACHs have done and focused on how they can structure the Medicaid waiver 2.0 around supporting some of that work instead of forcing or creating an additional silo, which the Pathways Hub actually kind of did originally, and we just continued that to look at this broader context. So I'm going to jump into the next phase of this cycle and give a little bit more details on the waiver 2.0. One thing I would just want to call out, just so you guys have some of the state and national context, is you're going to hear more so in this section the term health-related social needs. The reason why you're hearing it at the state and national level is, as I said earlier, CMS really likes this term, the state really likes this term. And so as states are submitting waivers, as CMS is approving waivers, they are actually approving it under the confines and the context of really supporting health-related social needs. I'd also say, and you'll see a slide later on here, that Washington State actually isn't the only state that is submitting a waiver focused on HRSN services. I'm going to use that acronym
It's
from
in the
now on.
glossary too.
It's in the glossary too. thankfully. Read your glossary. There are other states that you'll see on a slide later, most notably, I think the ones that are being tracked heavily are California, Oregon, and New York. And New York actually adopted and really leaned into the term of a social care network, which we're also leaning into
It's also on the glossary.
in the state, also on the glossary. I think the message is read your glossary. It might not answer everything, but it will answer a lot. Go on to the next slide. So for the state context, when you're looking at the waiver timeline, and we're also calling this out too, because we're actually technically in what's called DY8, which might not make any sense if you haven't been here since the early days. But our first waiver with the Healthcare Authority was approved January 7th of 2017, and it was the Medicaid Transformation Project waiver. And that waiver was for a 5-year period. And so again, as a number of you are aware of, during the Medicaid Transformation Project Waiver 1, the state had submitted a toolkit. It was really focused on healthcare practice transformation changes. And it was really looking at how we move our providers into bidirectional integration. Well, March 2020 came around, as you've seen once or twice, COVID hit. Evidently made a major shift in a lot of things in life. But what that shift did occur is it made healthcare providers focus on the pandemic. It also made a lot of other individuals look at really what are those health-related social needs that individuals need to be healthy and well. COVID Care Connect really leaned into housing assistance and food needs for someone who was isolated and quarantined, who couldn't go to work, so therefore didn't have the income to be able to pay for rent, and potentially couldn't even go out of their household, so wasn't able to access food and nutrition services to feed themselves and or their family. Because of COVID, the state actually submitted for a waiver extension in 2022, and so they actually got a 1-year extension to the original waiver to continue doing this work. That was 2022, then became DY6. So really, probably slightly before 2022, more in 2020 and 2021, we really started these discussions at the state level as well of what does a social care network look like. The coalition of ACHs in conjunction with our consultants, RMS Consulting, has really, it's been about a 2 or 3 year process in talking to the Healthcare Authority about how do we really build out social care networks in the way that we're doing this work. It's been about a year ago, actually, because it was last June's board meeting where you had Bruce Goldberg and Kathy Kaufman come and give a presentation. Some of you may have remembered that as well, really on what we were going to do under the waiver 2.0 when that got approved. And the waiver was approved in June, starting July 2023. So after 2022, the waiver was coming to the end, and HCA in the process had submitted for waiver renewal and in the process of waiting for CMS to give waiver approval, had basically a 6-month time period in there where they did a contract extension with the ACHs to continue our contracted work we were doing together. So that it could support what we were doing in partnership with them in planning of this work. That's what actually created DY7, which technically is not a full year, but it's really 3 months. And then in June of 2022, the waiver 2.0 got approved, and that really started July of 2023. So we are actually in the last month of our first waiver year. And that really was focused on addressing health-related social needs. It also switched EY years from a calendar year to a fiscal year. So now it's running from July to June. And so this waiver is slated to end June of 2028. I would just emphasize, and you'll see on one of the following slides, the work that's occurred over the course of a year. Similar to waiver 1.0, just because the waiver starts doesn't mean all the work starts in the first year. For those of you who were on the board in 2017, you will remember the certification processes and the year of writing we went through for the first waiver. to get through and really get started into the work. This year has had a lot of similarities on getting protocols improved, infrastructure approved as well. Also, CMS has seen an increase in waivers across the nation. And so CMS is also struggling and getting backlogged a little bit in the work that they're doing. So we're just seeing things take a little bit longer in this whole process. Next slide. So you've all seen the slide before in a previous presentation, and this just is really to give you a sense of the breadth of what Waiver 2.0 is covering. It also is to call out, I remember in the first waiver, a bulk of the work that was being done was done under accountable communities of health. The first waiver was for about 1.25 billion, and about 1.15 billion of that was really work focused through the ACHs. It's not a small portion of this work, but it's a much less smaller portion of Waiver 2.0 will really be driven through the ACHs. And our focus is really on these programs that address health-related social needs. If you go to the next slide, this just again gives you a sense of all the states that are submitting waivers related to social determinants of health and health-related social needs. So you'll see in the dark blue, you'll see approved HRSN framework in 8 states, approved prior to HRSN framework in 11 states, and pending 6 states. So any in the blue is really those, dark blue are those states that are also pretty well aligned in that health-related social needs work. Other states currently are operating waivers and venturing into that area, and their states submitted for approval. This just also gives you, I believe under the first waiver, we saw a lot less states doing waivers at that point in time. So you're just seeing also an increase in this kind of work and the use of this waiver authority across the nation. So if you go to the next slide. So addressing health-related social needs. So really when we think about this, the ACH's role in this is really community-based, creating that community-based care coordination hub for social needs. And for us, it's really how are we building that infrastructure into that social care network that we are building as a region. So when you think of that broad picture that Caroline showed at the end of her slide deck, that what you have here referenced kind of at the state level, that is what we're viewing as a social care network. The state, you'll hear the term community care hub a number of times, and I can't remember, it's listed a few times throughout this presentation, but that's generally referencing for us, those blue waivers, or those ones that are providing those direct community-based care coordination services. And so you'll see for addressing those needs, our focus is really building out the infrastructure for those community care hubs and that social need network. And then we are going to be supporting rolling out and funding of health-related social needs services. And I think if you click again, which in total, there's a list of 11 health-related social needs services. I think the thing I want to call out here specifically that's going to be contracted and managed through accountable communities of health is going to be that case management, outreach, and education. That is the green layer that you saw on the social care network infrastructure. So we, through ACHs and our community care hubs, specifically health partners, we are going to be funding and supporting that case management, outreach, and education. Or for us, we call it community-based care coordination, or working with people with lived experience in our communities. Those other health-related social needs services are still in a lot of ways getting developed and figured out throughout with the state, with CMS, and with the accountable communities of health. A number of these will run through managed care organizations utilizing their in lieu of services. The housing services will also run through the foundational community supports program that the state has stood up, and a number of them are still yet to be figured out. The key I would call out for that is the state's plan is to implement all of these over the course of the 5 years. So throughout 2028. So not all of these are going to turn on as of July of this year. Most of them will get turned on over the course of time. They're still working out the plan. But their goal is really to focus and work on one, make sure that they do it well, build the structures out for that, and then move to each one to make sure that they're delivering the services appropriately. When you hear the term readiness, and when I said readiness review for thriving together and the ACHs, what that means is that we have partners and a network in place that can start engaging into this case management, outreach, and education portion of this work. And as Caroline demonstrated on the slide, that's that social care network we're building. Next slide. This slide has been presented here and has been shared at the state level as well. And it is really what is ACH's Community Hub will do associated with this. And really what I want to call out, it's about investing in improving in the system. So not just in our region, but across the state, ACHs are focused on organizing community partners, making significant investments in community-based workforce, working with partners to establish closed loop referral networks, supporting building out that network adequacy. And that may also look like when we're thinking about the infrastructure funds we have available, utilizing that to figure out what are even some of those health related social needs that aren't provided in some of our communities, and how do we support building some of that infrastructure out. Next slide. So when we get to the waiver and we get to the waiver funding, there's really two primary pots of funds that are going to be going through the ACHs. One, as you've heard said before, is HRSN infrastructure funds, and one is HRSN service funds. And really, infrastructure funds are there and available to build out that infrastructure to support the social care network. In my mind, these are the things that we really need to put into place so we have a well-operating social care network. We have well-operating community care hubs. HRSN service funding that is going to be coming through us is really to support service delivery and operations of the network when we have it built out. One comment or one thing I would really give credence to the state for is that they're really looking at funding this through a PM per member per month model. And so for us, they're looking at how this would be delivered, paying $4 per member per month in our region. And our region is right around 10,000 Medicaid lives is quantified at this point in time. And so they would look at the structure that they have proposed to CMS and they're working to finalize approval on is a rate methodology where they would pay us that rate. We would collect quality metrics and process metrics that we would report out to the state for utilization and quality of the work, that then would help justify us continuing to receive that payment. If you go to the next slide.
It's not clicking, hold on. There we go.
Again, this just gives you a sense of what we've been working on over the course of the year to get there with the state in regards to the waiver renewal. So in November, the state submitted a HRSN infrastructure protocol. In December, they submitted the services protocol. In March, the CMS approved the infrastructure protocol. In April, we started working and the state has agreed to retroactively pay infrastructure funds that have been invested as of July 2023. So we've been working with the state and we got approval on infrastructure funds that we have spent since July 2023 to get retroactively reimbursed for. For our region, it equates to approximately $600,000. In May, which is basically a week ago, I say that so it's not a surprise. We've been working on a draft waiver umbrella contract with ACHs, and we're getting to that finalized component of that. At the end of May, we submitted readiness assessments for community care hubs or our social care network, really to demonstrate that we're ready to operationalize this work. The goal is to have all this approved and in place as of July 1, 2024. What I would say is to meet those basic readiness criteria to really start being ready to submit and invest funds into the infrastructure of our work, ACHs and Thriving Together across the state are ready to do that. We will have contracts and ready to implement contracts in place for the infrastructure funding. And we're able to do that investment now because that will flow through us and that will continue to build that infrastructure. We are still waiting on CMS approval and state finalization of the services protocol and the services rates. And so we are set and we're ready to be able to operationalize that and engage in that once that gets done. We haven't proceeded forward in building out any contracts or work around that to date. So that's really something in that tried-true readiness piece where we're just waiting to go and we're going to be waiting for the state to give the thumbs up that those protocols have been approved. If you go to the next slide. This going down to the localized contest text gives you a sense of what the funding will be over the course of these 5 years. So again, it's really been broken down to two main buckets, infrastructure and services. And so over the course of the 5 years, we'll have 12.1 million to invest in localized infrastructure. And then 19.2 million focused on services for a total of 31.3 million. Few things I would highlight specific to the infrastructure on this is infrastructure funds will be carried over year after year. So in sense, we're already in DYA or year one of the waiver, and we won't expend all the funds that were available to us for this year. So anything we don't expend will still be available for us to expend next year on top of what we have available for next year. And that will kind of continue on for infrastructure funds. For service dollars, we don't have a clear sense of that right now, to be honest, but I would venture on if we're engaging and we're utilizing services and implementing services, we will receive the funds as a PMPM. I wouldn't make the assumption that any of those continue to roll over. For the infrastructure funds, the other thing I would call out is there's 4 allowable spending categories for these, and you can see those in the bottom left. I would also call out to the Action Health Partners contract you approved today was really for infrastructure investments and supports. And so the contract, the deliverables in the contract and the outline in the contract also align with those 4 buckets. We will also be asking Action Health Partners to report up to us so that we can report up to the state expenditures under those 4 buckets as well. If you go to the next slide. This just breaks it down by year, both for the infrastructure and the case management funds. So you get a sense of what was available for us this year and over the course of the next 4 years. We didn't aim to spend that $1.7 million this year because there were just too many unknowns, and the fact that it carried over means that we still have access to it in the future. So we didn't really want to spend or estimate spending those dollars if we weren't sure what or how we were going to get reimbursed for that. We will have the ability to move more actively on that over the course of these next 4 years. For the service dollars, you will see what that equates for service dollars for us year after year as well. And as you can see, there is no DYA service dollars in this slide because we don't have those protocols and those agreements in place for this year. We weren't able to access service dollars for this year. Next slide. Oh, go back. I spoke too soon. So next slide, and next slide I turn over to Sarah. So let me pause and see if there's any questions on anything I went through.
We haven't received any of these funds technically, correct?
We have not, no. So we have to get the umbrella contract signed.
Great finance committee
Yeah,
question.
great finance. We have not. We have approved for retrospective payment, but really I wouldn't have any anticipation until we get the contract signed and the confirmed scope of work for the infrastructure funding. I would say, again, when you're looking at like risk and certainty with the infrastructure protocol approved, with the contracts moving forward, that's pretty certain funds at this point in time. I would say the case management rate, the biggest thing I would put a caution out for is they still need to get that PMPM methodology approved at the state. I also would say And they are not at the state, at the federal level. They are pretty certain and they've signified or they've demonstrated that the conversations with CMS is going well on that. But I don't know what that means if that's not in place as of July 1 of this year. So I think that DY9 4.8 million, that is probably where you'll see the greatest risk if it gets approved a quarter into this next year. It could be a third of that, and then so on and so on until CMS does that approval process. And there was a report that went out earlier this year that CMS is behind on approval processes. And so that's why I say we're ready, but we're not actively moving forward with that service work until we have more certainty at the state level. Good finance question.
Well, nobody read their financial report, obviously, questioning why we're off on our budget. It's because of that.
Mhm.
In the sub parentheses.
That's an emphasis to read your financial report.
I did. We haven't talked
He
about it
does,
yet.
he knows. He makes us read them too.
Other questions? With silence, I'm assuming that you guys are just feeling fully confident in this and knowing
super excited.
and super excited.
About the possibilities, yes.
As soon as those parentheses aren't right there
Linda said,
anymore.
let's get to work. I think I saw Manuel unmute.
I was just gonna comment that, excuse me, I think the slides are very well done. You guys have done an excellent job in walking through a very complex overall concept, and it's good to see that you guys have a pretty firm understanding of what we're trying to do. So I appreciate you sharing this today. I thought the slides were very well done.
Well, thank you. We spent some time really trying to figure out how best to explain this, and we weren't sure we actually hit any marks at all. So it's good to know that we've hit out a number of them. And I'll turn it over to Sarah to take us home then.
All right, so as we look over the next 5 years, what this means is you're going to see an increased mix in our revenues. Okay, so before we were 100% total waiver revenue. As you can see, we're really pushing to diversify that. Currently, we have integrated some grants. You guys are going to see Care Connect come on. John spoke about some grants earlier. Then we will always be putting on some continuing education and special events within the region, along with our investment income. So we're looking at an 80-20 at the moment, with high aspirations to get that closer to 50%. But current projections are sitting at 80-20. Next slide. All right, so we have every fiber of our being to spend every penny we get of waiver 2. So as you can see, we have worked on projecting how we're going to do this over the next 5 years. And what this means is you can see expenses out the gate we were paying for, because we're still waiting for some of that money to come through the door. So those revenues are going to come in, and as we get that money in DY9, probably towards the end of DY9, start of DY10, so 25, 26, you're going to see expenses start catching up to the money we're going to get in. And so we will end in 2028 with expenses a little higher than revenue, because in John's last slide, the revenues trail off in the last year. All right, next slide. So as you can see, what this is this is our assets. You have a very cute helper. Yes, Peter. So as you can see, assets to liabilities and net assets, they're both going to climb over the next 5 years, because any penny we can reinvest, we will reinvest. And we will reinvest that from those interest income, any type of additional earning, we plan to reinvest in the mission. Because as you saw in Caroline's slides, right, we're supporting blue and light green. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that that continued investment in the community is seen from all angles and any which way we can do it. Does anyone have any questions?
I would just comment that things that Sarah helps support or promote too is that her slides is that we're still keeping an eye on our fiscal ability to support this work, and we're still as an organization managing and keeping our fiscal ability to continue this work staying pretty strong. So you can see even at the end of the waiver, we'll still end up with a number of assets that we can utilize as well. And so I would say as long as the funding goes through, our risk of running out of funds is pretty minimal over the course till 2028.
Mm-hmm.
It also demonstrates with the waiver funding, it's still a good chunk of the work that we do, and that's why we're still at about 80% of our revenue coming from waiver. Any questions on anything you heard from Caroline, Sarah, or I?
Good job, but how are we gonna call HRSN? Is there a terminology for that? Because I don't know if I could say HRSN.
You can use plain language. Social and economic needs.
All right. I thought there's gonna be a fancy term. Darn it.
Title condition.
The thing we can't solve is everyone wanting to get their stake in the naming of all this work. And so there is always gonna be a state agency or a partner or someone who wants to name it what they feel is the appropriate way. And we're always gonna have to deal with that different naming system.
One thing that I might add, John, is that a lot of the ACH hubs have been talking about the fact that the waiver offers an opportunity to truly create a no wrong door system, which means that like instead of checking like when people are referred to us, we can say, yes, we will help you. And then we'll figure out which of the funding sources to like tag you to, but the per member per month payment allows us to truly like not require that people meet all these check boxes before they can get services. So that's actually a pretty big thing, I'd say, that a lot of the ACHs are excited about testing.
I think the other thing, just to keep aware for everyone, is we wanted really all of you to have this context because since our ultimate goal is to invest in the network that is there and really build up that infrastructure. And to Rosalinda's point, because we don't have contracts in place, that means with the state, as we are getting contracts in place with the state, that means we're also going to be getting contracts in place with our local community to really flow these funds down and support building that infrastructure. It also means you guys will be seeing those contracts come to the board. So we want to make sure you guys feel comfortable understanding the way that we are building this out, the way that this system looks, and why you're seeing those contracts come to the board. And so that kind of helps you give you that bigger picture of when you see another contract for Action Health Partners or contract from Advance to do this work, how it's relating up to that bigger picture.
Peter?
You know, I'm thinking about the long term, and I remember a presentation that was given years ago about how the US spends more on healthcare and less on social services than in a lot of other countries, and that there is a relationship between them. And I'm wondering, over the next 5 years, if we might be demonstrating the, overall efficacy of this work that results in maybe some of them being built into the public health infrastructure. I don't know, I'm just,
Yep.
it's amazing what you're doing, Caroline, with this, social health network. But I think it does need to demonstrate efficacy in, improving overall health and maybe reducing medical costs over time. At least that's maybe the bet that other countries have made. But it'll be interesting to see where this goes long term, after the waiver ends.
Yeah, and the ACH hubs are already talking and planning out an evaluation of the hubs that would probably lean on folks like OHSU core to do that kind of analysis that would show potentially decreased, healthcare costs or improved health and well-being. Another thing I want to mention is that in our region, working with Action Health Partners in Advance, we're proactively folding Cantrell's ladder into the client management systems so that we can tell whether the support they got improved their health and well-being based on that self-reported measure. So we have like the community-wide survey around well-being, but then we'll have the individual level data for people who are case managed, which will be a really great complement. And then we'll be able to know and not wait 4 years for an evaluation, whether people are better off.
Yeah.
Peter, to your question too, is I think the end result that HCA is thinking about this is that at the end of the 5 years, they'd like to see this funded through Medicaid contracting in the future. One thing that they're considering is having it go through managed care organization Medicaid contracting. I don't know if it would ever come through the state itself as well, which I think is a good step and first move. One thing I would still emphasize a little bit is as long as it's going through medical paying and medical billing, you're still always going to have really that push and tug on trying to medicalize a really community-based public health system. And so in reality, and I think COVID Care Connect showed an example in how DOH was able to stand up a similar system that was very effective during COVID. It would be good to see this more broadly placed across all of the state agencies and work and really in a public health field. And ideally, that is really where it shifts to at some point in time.
Yeah, because that's how it is in other countries, right? The public, it's part of the public health infrastructure.
And it's part of that move, right? Whenever it's in a medical model, part of it is always going to be about cost savings, which then you're targeting those who already are in crisis and have health issues instead of looking at it as a preventative model where you're really moving upstream to support creating those environments where people won't have to be put into a crisis to begin with.
Right. Wonderful, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I think it is back to Linda.
Okay, we're right on time. Not quite 4:45, but close. Unless we have any other comments, Peter, did you have one more thing?
Put his hand down.
Oh, okay. I think we can adjourn.
All right, thank you all for coming.
Take care, everyone. Thank
Sorry
you.
you all didn't make it here in person.
Yes.
All right.
We're gonna have a feast.
I'm gonna get some of that food.
I know, I'm starting to get hungry.
So that little, what was that, little slider or something, it's so cute.
Really good. That's really